Well, welcome to all of you to what is the ninth in this series, Digging Deeper in Lockdown. We're diverting on a few of these sessions from archaeology in the Bible to talk about Oxford's Christian heritage. And tonight I'm very excited to be able to talk a little bit about C.S. Lewis, who's a big name in the Christian world and in the world generally, especially as the person who devised the whole world of Narnia, which I gather is about to be made into another film series sometime soon. Just a reminder, I'm doing this series during a lockdown in the UK because currently it's not possible. Even if you came to Oxford, I couldn't take you to the kilns. I couldn't take you into the Eagle and Child pub. It's closed. The colleges are closed. So in a way, what I'm going to be showing you today is a little bit, if you came and said, can you give me a tour around Oxford and show me some things that are relevant to C.S. Lewis, these are the things that I would show you. But what I'm not going to be doing is giving you a full biography of him. We're only going to be looking at his time in Oxford. So the title is C.S. Lewis's Oxford. So there'll be a number of his books that may be favourites for you that I'm afraid won't get a quote, that may not even get a mention. So please don't expect in half an hour or just over. Please don't expect every aspect of C.S. Lewis to be covered. The idea is just to take you around or show you some of the places that I would show you if we were able to do that and you came to Oxford. Just a reminder, when we're departing from archaeology in the Bible and looking at these characters from history, so I don't want it just to be interesting, but actually for there to be some practical application. And Hebrews 13:7 exhorts us to remember leaders, remember those who spoke the word to us, to consider the outcome of their way of life and imitate their faith. So again, at the end, I'm just going to have a moment just to step back a little bit and think if there are things that we can learn for ourselves from C.S. Lewis's life. Now, the other thing that's quite exciting, I'm going to give you some new things that are just, well, they're not in Alistair McGrath's biography even. So some things that you may not have come across before relating to C.S. Lewis. I'm going to slightly unusually, normally I try not to detract from the talk and I put the summary at the end. On this occasion, I'm actually going to give you my summary, here we are at the beginning. So there we are, that's what we're going to talk about. The first 5, if you will, are more really just the bare facts of his life. And then 6 to 10, we'll talk more about his legacy or the outcome of his life. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is his arrival in Oxford as a teenager. He was 18 years and 1 week old when he first set foot in Oxford, and unfortunately he got off on the wrong foot because he turned the wrong way out of the railway station. So this is in December 1916, the middle of World War I, and this is a quote from what he wrote in his book Surprised by Joy. I've got, just by the way, we've got quotes from I think 2 of his books today. I've got quotes from 2 of his letters to his best friend Arthur Greaves, quote from one of the sermons, but it's not going to be an exhaustive look at lots of his thought processes. So just a smattering. So here we are, so quote from Surprised by Joy. This is what he wrote. My first taste of Oxford was comical enough. Having made no arrangements about quarters, sounds a bit like teenagers even these days, I sallied out of the railway station on foot to find a lodging or a cheap hotel, all agog for dreaming spires. My first disappointment at what I saw could be dealt with. Towns always show their worst face to the railway. But as I walked on and on, I became more bewildered. Could the succession of mean shops really be Oxford? But still I went on. Only when it became obvious that there was very little town left ahead of me, that I was in fact getting to open country, did I turn around and look. There behind me, far away, Never more beautiful since was the fabled cluster of spires and towers. I had come out of the station on the wrong side, and been all this time walking into what was even then the mean and sprawling suburb of Botley, which is where I work. I did not see to what extent this little adventure was an allegory of my whole life, written in retrospect. And I think possibly for the first time on the stage, we have none other than the Oxford Railway Bridge. So here we are. I made it as pretty as I could, but there we are. That's the railway bridge. That's the Botley Road, along which C.S. Lewis headed in completely the wrong direction on his first arrival in Oxford. So I can't get any earlier than that. That's his very first few moments in Oxford. You're probably not that interested in studying railway bridges, but there we are. At that time, when he was a teenager, and this is before he went off to fight in the Great War, he had no religion. He said he wrote 2 months before he arrived to his best friend Arthur Greaves, who was a believer. He told his friend, "Look, I believe in no religion. All religions are mythologies invented by human beings in response to natural events or emotional needs. This is the recognized scientific account of the growth of religion." I mean, this is in 1916. He says, "There is no good reason to believe in God. No intelligent person would ever want to believe." That was his starting point. Now, he did extremely well, got a triple first, which was a very rare achievement in Oxford, and went on after the war to be invited to be a fellow of Magdalen College, where he was responsible for teaching English language and literature. That's a beautiful building. It's known as the New Building, built in the 18th century. C.S. Lewis was given some of the nicest rooms, which were these ones here, so if you can see there, and they went all the way through to the back, and he could look out onto the famous deer park. Oxford colleges used to grow their own, and so having your own food supply was there. Magdalen is the only one still to have its own deer park. But that's where he was, and he was a fellow for a long period of time, for 29 years. That's where he was based. Now, something very significant happened in that room that we're looking at there. So I will, if I can read to you, this is a quote about something that happened in that very room when he was just around 31 years old. And this is what he wrote in I think the book again, Surprised by Joy. "You must picture me alone in that room in Magdalen, the one that I've just shown you. Night after night, feeling, whenever my mind lifted even for a second from my work, the steady, unrelenting approach of him whom I so earnestly desired not to meet. That which I greatly feared had at last come upon me. In Trinity term of 1929, I gave in and admitted that God was God and knelt and prayed. Perhaps that night, the most dejected and reluctant convert in all of England." It took a couple of years before he was willing to accept Christianity. And a key part in that were his relationships, his friendships. Especially, there's one particular night when he went on he had dinner with two friends, Tolkien, the author of Lord of the Rings, and another friend, Dyson, and they had dinner together a couple of years later, and they went for a long walk afterwards along Addison's Walk, which is a lovely, I don't know how long it is, maybe a mile. There's a lovely circular walk that you can do that just starts behind, well, just behind where that last photograph was taken. And in the course of that walk, various things happened. They came back, went back to his room, carried on talking with Dyson and Tolkien. At 3 p.m., 3 a.m. rather, Tolkien said sorry he had to go. He had a wife and family, and he carried on talking with Dyson. It took a few days for the implications of that night to sink in, but he wrote a letter to his friend Arthur Greaves back in Belfast. We're going to show you here. Here we are. This is a picture of Addison's Walk. This is as close to the autumn as I could find. So this is the walkway, and you've got to imagine these three gentlemen walking along in the dark, and this is what C.S. Lewis wrote in his letter to his friend. I have just passed on, this is 1st of October 1931, I have just passed on from believing in God to definitely believing in Christ, in Christianity. I will try to explain this another time. My long night talk with Dyson and Tolkien had a good deal to do with it. So again, if you came to Oxford, this is somewhere I would like to show you. Now, this is the next slide I've got is the place where C.S. Lewis lived for around 33 years, but I've titled this The Unconventional. I could have said impractical, but in some of these things actually did work for him. So he had an extraordinary legal arrangement for the ownership of this house, the Kilns. He and his brother Warney and his a friend in the war's mother, Mrs. Moore, they all put money in, and it was a curious relationship, a legal structure which ended on C.S. Lewis's death. I don't think there's a single solicitor who would recommend a legal structure like this for owning a property nowadays. But effectively, he just had the right to live there, and so did his brother. And then at the end of their days, it then passed on to Mrs. Moore's offspring. But he was unconventional in some other ways. His financial affairs weren't terrific. He was stung with a very big tax bill a couple of years after the war, when income tax rates went up as high as 90% for some people on his royalty income. And he lived with a real fear of being caught out for his tax affairs for the rest of his life, sadly. Joy Davidman, the American woman who he later married, was much more shrewd. He used to arrange all his own deals with his with his publishers, and by using an agent, he was able to treble his income just like that. So she was much more shrewd. I mean, his dress sense could best be described as shabby. He wasn't a foreign traveller. I mean, towards the end of his life, he went to Greece once, and the only time before that he'd been abroad was to fight in World War I. So this is someone who, I mean, to be honest, C.S. Lewis's Oxford, it doesn't actually cut out all that much, because he spent so much time of his life in Oxford. He was also, he had some annoying habits. He would use his carpet, his floor in Magdalen College, as an ashtray when he was tipping out his pipe. So that's what I call C.S. Lewis, the unconventional. But lastly, he was a member of the Church of England, and he went to his local C of E church, which was Holy Trinity in Headington Quarry. That's a plaque on the left, a brass plaque was attached to the pew where he used to sit, and on the right, and that's where he would go Sunday by Sunday. Very ordinary local church for local people in that part of Oxford. On the right, he chose to be buried there in the cemetery of his local church. And you can see his name there, Clive Staples Lewis, and then his older brother, Warren or Warney, further down. And he died, I mean, sadly, he didn't even make it to 65. He died a week before his 65th birthday, on the same day as JFK was assassinated. That was the end of his life. So I'm going to stop there for a moment. So basically what we've seen is this is the outline of his life, his first moments in Oxford and the place where he was buried. So these are the bare facts, but what we're going to do now is look at a little bit more at his legacy, at the outcome of his life. So what are we going to look at here? First of all, he became a parent. Now, he had a troubled childhood himself. But one thing he would have seen in Oxford is boys. He was at Magdalen College. There were lots of boys who were singing in the chapel choir. They went to Magdalen College School. And when at the age of 60, he found himself a single parent with two boys, he didn't just marry their mother, but he actually legally adopted Douglas and David Gresham as his own legal children. As a single parent, he was responsible for their schooling. And it was extraordinary because the school they went to, Magdalen College School, was where our son went. And I remember talking to one of the teachers there who said, yes, this is an amazing school. He said, when I first started here, there were other teachers who remembered C.S. Lewis coming into a parents' evening to discuss the progress and if they were teaching his charges, Douglas and David, well or not. I mean, that's pretty intimidating if you're a parent if you're a teacher at a parents' evening like that and C.S. Lewis walks in to ask you. But there's a wonderful photograph. I couldn't resist putting it in. It's not one I took. This is from 1940. And by the way, if you're involved at all in health and safety, you might well have a heart attack when you see this picture. You could have great fun, I think, running a webinar and analysing just how many things can you see fail the health and safety test from this on this screen. So there we are. That's the number of Magdalen College School boys in winter 1940 when C.S. Lewis was there at Magdalen College. I mean, he could have been just half a mile away from this picture at the time, C.S. Lewis, where this was taken. So lovely little insight that he got that chance to be a parent and possibly to put right or to love these boys in a way that he hadn't received himself. Now, further up the river Cherwell, comes to a bathing place known as Parson's Pleasure, where we know that he went swimming when he was an undergraduate. And there are some bridges over the river. And there we are. And there's a photograph. This is the cycle path as it is now, going past Parson's Pleasure. And the next feature of his legacy I want to talk about is the amazing creative writer that he was. Narnia, of course, is an enduring part of probably every English child's childhood now. And there are some lampposts lit on a snowy day. And of course, it was lampposts like these that would have inspired him in creating his fictional world, as would I expect some of the gargoyles and so forth that you can see around Oxford. In fact, one of his books in the Narnia series, The Horse and His Boy, is dedicated to those boys, Douglas and David Gresham, whom he'd adopted. So the creative writer. Next, here we are. I want to show you a picture of the inside of St. Mary's Church. We were there last week, looking at lots of things that had happened. There you can see the pulpit, and that was the same pulpit which C.S. Lewis mounted on the occasions when he was invited to preach. In fact, that's the end of year service for Magdalen College School, where his sons were. And I just want to read from you and give you a flavour of one of his sermons, the Weight of Glory. And this is a memorable sermon. This is what he said. You've got to remember, he's speaking in a city which is all about legacy. It's all about reaching beyond yourself, about setting up or creating ideas, making discoveries that are going to change the whole planet. Fame, glory, spires, plaques on walls, Bodleian Library, names given. I mean, it's all about outliving your own death, trying to create something that lasts. And this is what C.S. Lewis had to say in an extraordinary reversal of that phenomenon. He said this: there are no ordinary people. You have never talked to a mere mortal. Nations, cultures, arts, civilizations, these are mortal, and their life is to ours as the life of a gnat. But it is immortals whom we joke with, work with, marry, snub, and exploit, immortal horrors or everlasting splendors. Marvelous, extraordinary quote. I mentioned he didn't travel a great deal. You might say, well, what did C.S. Lewis do for fun? Contrary to what's in the Shadowlands film, he wasn't some boring old so-and-so who needed livening up by a lively American. C.S. Lewis didn't need livening up. He was extremely lively, sociable, and gregarious. He loved his food. He loved his smoking. He loved his drinking. Apologies for any Americans watching this. That's not part of your what you want to hear about him, but that's true. He enjoyed the good things in life. I love this. He was Alistair McGrath mentions this in his biography of Lewis. How would you judge him as a writer? How would he want to be judged, and by what standard? Well, C.S. Lewis said two things. The judge is very clear, it's time, and the standard by which you're judged is pleasure. Literally, are people enjoying what you've written after a period of time? I like a guy like that. This is what infuriated Tolkien, who believed in quality, no matter whether people liked it or not. Whereas, I mean, C.S. Lewis, he put Father Christmas into Narnia. Why not? But Tolkien was horrified at things like that he did. But he was this is what C.S. Lewis's ideal day would be, and this is a quote from his book, The Four Loves. When 4 or 5 of us, after a hard day's walking, have come to our inn, when our slippers are on, our feet spread out towards the blaze, and our drinks at our elbows, when the whole world, and something beyond the world, opens itself to our minds as we talk, and no one has any claim on or any responsibility for one another, but all are free men and equals, as if we had first met an hour ago, while at the same time an affection mellowed by the years enfolds us. Life, natural life, has no better gift to give. Who could have deserved it? He's well known for forming a group, the Inklings. It wasn't terribly formal. And I'll show you a picture here. This is a pub where they met, the famous Eagle and Child, again seen in the snow a few years ago. There it is on the right. And on the left, another pub, which he enjoyed visiting in the summer, the Trout. And there were very many of these. And I think in terms of his legacy, what we see from this is that C.S. Lewis was a great friend to people, a great enthusiast. He loved bringing along new friends. He got his brother Warnie to come along and join the Inklings. Tolkien often didn't like these new people that Lewis kept bringing along, but if he found a nice person or a good person he thought would like it, he said, come along and join us. Nothing cliquey or exclusive about him there. And this is what Tolkien wrote about Lewis. He wrote this: the unpayable debt I owe to Lewis was sheer encouragement. But for his unceasing eagerness for more, I would never have brought Lord of the Rings to a conclusion. I love that, his reference to sheer encouragement. I think for around 23 years or so, every Tuesday lunchtime, Lewis, Tolkien, and a group of others would meet there, discuss their books, discuss their works. But to be honest, it was the friendship, I think, that was really appreciated by all those who were there. The last slide I'm going to show you looks like it might be a mistake. It's a hotel with some traffic going past, but bear with me and I'll explain. This is the hotel where, contrary to what's in the Shadowlands, this is the actual hotel where he met his future wife, Joy Davidman. The Eastgate Hotel. It was also the place where he would regularly meet Tollers, Tolkien, for beer and pies on Monday morning. And, I know I can relate to this. He couldn't even get through a whole morning's work. They would generally meet at 11 a.m. I don't know if some of you working in offices have ever felt that. Really, 12 noon just seems too long to wait before you have your lunch break. Well, C.S. Lewis knew how that felt. But there we are. It's still a hotel nowadays. But also I'm putting this here because this was also a place where he met for lunch regularly with an author called Sheldon Vanauken. After their last time together, Sheldon Vanauken writes that Lewis waved from the other side of the road, and to alleviate Vanauken's sadness at their parting, he yelled above the traffic. You got some traffic there. C.S. Lewis yelled above the traffic to Sheldon Vanauken, "Christians never say goodbye." And I can't think of a better way of drawing to a close C.S. Lewis's Oxford than that lovely quote, "Christians never say goodbye." It says so much about the man. If we can stop and reflect for a moment, I hope this has been interesting, but more than that, I just want you to think a few things. First of all, this is an obvious point, but I think his life tells us there is hope for the non-trendy, single, quirky among us, which is good news. Next, it helps us see just the sheer value. You may not be an internationally known apologist or Christian preacher, but some of us get to be a husband and parent, and all of us are able to be a friend. And that was an extraordinary part of his legacy, his encouragement, his sheer encouragement of others. I think the last thing I see from it, which is extraordinary, is to think that his conversion happened not because of a gifted preacher, but because of friends, fellow academics, Tolkien, Dyson, Williams, Greaves. And these people kept on trying to talk and converse with C.S. Lewis. And in the end, God touched his heart and he changed. One of the least likely converts that you could imagine at the time. So I think those are things we can step back and reflect on. For those of you who got your interest piqued in what would make a man change like this, I'd recommend reading Mere Christianity, or to be frank, if you read any of C.S. Lewis's books, it's likely to lead you on to make you want to read some of the others. Now, what's happening next week? Next week, we're going to be doing the 10th in this series, the Bible in the British Museum. And the other thing I'm excited to do for the first time is buoyed on with the encouragement of those of you who are watching me live. I have, with some other help, put together a website, and I just wanted to give you a chance to look at this. By the way, Zenas, I'm going to ask you at the end if you know why the word Zenas keeps popping up. I hope this will work. And all of the webinars that you've seen in the last few weeks have all been posted here, and all sorts of pictures and photos, some of those that we've used, some of those that we haven't. So I hope you can see this. And if we go down, there's a bit of blurb about me. Here we are. And then here we are. And along the top, you can see British Museum tours, Ashmolean tours, Oxford's Christian Heritage, and the Egyptian Will. And right now, slight promotion for those of you who have not yet told me you're interested. This is a bit about the Will of Nanakhe, this extraordinary woman who takes disinherits 3 of her children for not looking after her in her old age. So if you like the look of that, please email me and let me know. But thank you very much. That's the end of our session. I'm going to turn off now, but those of you who can stay around to have a discussion about C.S. Lewis, that would be